The day they stamped his name into the dirt, Kale Joran was 19 years old, unschooled, and smiling. Not the smile of a man who didn't understand what was happening. He understood perfectly. Oren Vale, champion of Warlord Casvan Drath, holder of the Crimson Seal, trained from boyhood in the Drath Academy's closed-door style, had just taken Kale's practice sword at the wrist, snapped it across his knee, and dropped both halves into the tournament mud. The crowd in the Thornwall Arena had gone quiet for exactly 1 second, and then exploded in laughter. A brawler from the outer districts with no lineage, no master, no school seal on his sash. What had he expected? Oren leaned down and pressed Kale's paper fighter's registration into the mud with one finger. "Come back," he said, loudly enough for the front rows to hear, "when someone has taught you what fighting is." The Warlord, watching from the high box, didn't even bother to look. Kale picked up the two halves of the broken sword. He kept smiling. Deep in his chest, somewhere below the laughter, and the mud, and the shame, something shifted, like a lock finding its mechanism for the first time. System, Pilgrim's Codex, dormant state ended. Condition met. An unschooled fighter has been publicly bested by a closed-door style in open. First strand available. Seek the masters. Absorb the continent. Classification pending. He read the words twice. Then he stood up, tucked the broken halves into his pack, and walked out of Thornwall before the next bout began. The first Grandmaster lived 3 days east, in a camp at the edge of the Fen River marshes. Master Doru, Strike Foundation, the oldest percussive style in the region, known for turning an opponent's guard into a liability. His students trained on hardwood posts until their knuckles bled. He did not take students without a letter of introduction from a registered school. Kale knocked on the camp gate with the broken sword halves tucked under his arm. "I'll fight your best student," he said. "If I lose, I leave. If I win, you teach me." Master Doru looked at him for a long moment. "If you win," he said, "I'll do something better. I'll fight you myself." The student fight lasted 4 minutes. The student was good, crisp, precise, academy trained. Kale lost the first exchange and won the next 6. When it was over, Master Doru walked into the yard without a word and stood across from Kale in the open stance of Strike Foundation. They fought until sunset. It wasn't clean. Kale took a strike across the ribs in the third exchange that left a bruise the color of old wood. But he read the geometry of it, the weight transfer, the guard commitment, the tell in Doru's left shoulder before a power strike. And when the last light went out of the sky, Master Doru stepped back and said, "Sit down." Taught for 6 days. System, Pilgrim's Codex, Strand 1 of 7 integrated, Strike Foundation, permanent, current state, reading. Kale left on the 7th morning. Behind him, one of Warlord Drath's scouts who had been watching the camp for 2 days turned and rode hard for Thornwall. The Warlord's first hunter reached Kale outside the town of Varus, on the road to the mountain passes. 2 men, seal of the Drath Academy on their wraps, carrying the short guard swords the Academy's enforcement wing favored. "The Warlord's invitation," the taller one said. "Come back to Thornwall. Oren wants another look at you." Kale set down his pack. "Tell him I'm busy." The fight lasted less than 2 minutes. Strike Foundation, the geometry Doru had burned into his hands, made the guard swords irrelevant. 2 hunters left on foot, considerably lighter in terms of confidence. Kale picked up his pack and kept walking. The second Grandmaster was in the mountain passes. A woman named Sale, who had not taken the name of any school, and did not want one. Style was built on misdirection, angle shift, false weight, making an opponent commit to a strike that was never going to land. Students wore no seals. She taught whoever could find her, and most people couldn't. "You fight like you're reading a book," she told Kale after their first session. "You see too much. That's your problem and your gift." She taught him to be unreadable instead. System, Pilgrim's Codex, Strand 2 of 7 integrated, Angle Shift Foundation, permanent, current state, concealing. 3 days after he left the mountain camp, the Warlord's second hunter found him, a single man this time, better than the first 2 combined. A genuine Drath Academy graduate, Crimson 3rd rank. He had never fought someone who moved the way Kale moved now. He didn't lose badly. He simply couldn't land anything. Kale was never where he committed. The Crimson 3rd spent 6 minutes striking air, and then took a Strike Foundation combination in the collar that sat him on the road, for a long moment while he considered his choices, chose to walk away and report back. The Warlord, in his box above Thornwall, received the report with a stillness that made his advisors uncomfortable. "Keep following him," he said. "Let him collect whatever he's collecting. He'll have to come back eventually." The next 5 masters took months. Master Orvith in the Delta cities, ground control, the wrestling foundations style that had dominated the lowland fighting circuits for 200 years. KNELT fought every one of Orvith's senior students in a single afternoon before Orvith came out himself, and they went 3 hours on the practice floor before the old man laughed and said, "All right, you've earned it." System, Pilgrim's Codex. Strand 3 of 7 integrated. Ground Control Foundation. Permanent. Current state. Anchoring. A former military trainer named Voss, tired, to a river town school, who taught a style built entirely around reading an opponent's breathing pattern and timing strikes to the exhale. KNELT fought him twice, lost the first, won the second by a margin so thin it was almost philosophical. System, Pilgrim's Codex. Strand 4 of 7 integrated. Breath Reading Foundation, permanent. Current state, timing. An old woman in the southern provinces who had never fought in a tournament in her life. Style had no name because she had invented it herself from 40 years of watching animals move. She taught KNELT for 3 weeks without accepting a single formal match. "I don't fight students," she said. "I correct them." On the last day she told him, "You're not a brawler. You never were. You're a mirror. The problem is you didn't know what to reflect." System, Pilgrim's Codex. Strand 5 of 7 integrated. Adaptive Foundation, permanent. Current state, reflecting. The Warlord's hunters kept coming. Better each time, higher crimson ranks. Sometimes 2 at once. They all lost. The fights got shorter. KNELT didn't celebrate any of them. He kept the broken sword halves in his pack. He kept walking. The 6th master found KNELT, which was unexpected. An ancient fighter named Dur, moving slowly down a mountain road, stopped in front of KNELT and studied him the way a carpenter studies a piece of wood they haven't decided what to build with yet. "You're the pilgrim," Dur said. "People keep calling me that. That's because you are one." He tilted his head. "I have one thing left to teach. It will take 4 days. After that I have nothing more to give anyone, and that's fine." He turned and started back up the mountain. "Come." What Dur taught was control of distance. Not footwork in the conventional sense, but the precise management of the gap between 2 fighters. The ability to make that gap exactly what you needed it to be in any given breath. It was the quietest style KNELT had ever seen. It was also the most dangerous. System, Pilgrim's Codex. Strand 6 of 7 integrated. Distance Foundation, permanent. Current state, commanding space. On the 5th day, Dur handed him a cup of tea and said, "The last one is in Veldren Reach. In the Grand Arena, you already know who it is." KNELT looked at him. "Oren Vale," Dur said. "The Crimson Seal. He's the 7th style. The only way to integrate it is in open combat in the arena, with witnesses." He paused. "The Warlord knows you're coming. He's arranged a formal tournament. He thinks it's a trap. It's not?" Smiled for the first time. "The trap is for him." Veldren Reach's Grand Arena held 12,000 people. Every seat was full. The Warlord's banner, black and crimson, hung from every pillar. Casvandrath sat in the high box with the same stillness he'd worn the day he watched Oren stamp KNELT's registration into the mud, except that now 2 of his best crimson hunters were standing behind him because 7 of his others had come back from the road and filed reports that had unsettled him deeply. Oren Vale walked into the arena to applause, crimson seal gleaming. The Drath Academy's closed-door style, 40 techniques, each one refined to a single-purpose perfection, each one a problem with a specific solution. He had never lost a tournament bout. Kale Joran walked in on the other side, travel-worn wrap, linen. The broken sword halves were not with him. He had left them at the inn. He didn't need them anymore. The crowd went quiet, then louder, then confused because KNELT did not take the opening stance of any school they recognized. He took no stance at all. System, Pilgrim's Codex. Condition met. Strand 7 available on integration. All prior strands active. Absolute form. Unlocked. Classification generating. The bell rang. Oren came in with the Drath Academy's signature opening. A commitment feint to the shoulder that baited a guard raise. Then a redirect to the ribs. Clean and fast, the technique that had ended most of his bouts in the first exchange. KNELT wasn't there. Angle shift, sales lesson on. The false weight, the non-commitment, moved him 6 inches off the line. The strike landed on air. Oren reset. Came again. This time with the second technique, the one that countered a retreat. Kale didn't retreat, he moved forward. Ground control, Orvith's anchoring. The low center, the wrestling mofang, met Oren's momentum and redirected it without a clash. Oren stumbled a half step. Reset again. Faster now, reading, for pattern. There was no pattern. Strike foundation, distance foundation, breath reading, time to the exhale. Adaptive foundation, with every adjustment Oren made. Each exchange a different language, each language fluent. Kale moved through 6 strands in the first 90 seconds, as if selecting from a library in Oren. Brilliant, trained, unbeaten Oren was losing the thread of every counter before he could complete it, because the man across from him was not fighting any one style. He was fighting all of them simultaneously, and no closed-door training in the world had prepared anyone for that. System. Pilgrim's Codex. Strand 7 integrating. Drath closed-door foundation. Absolute form. Engaged. Classification. Unranked. Above school the Pilgrim. The final exchange took 4 seconds. Oren committed to his strongest technique. The Crimson Seal's defining move. The one that had never failed him. Kale read the shoulder tell, the weight transfer, the exhale timing. He stepped into it. The impact on the deflecting angle sail had taught him, and the distance collapsed to 0 exactly the way Dur had drilled into him for 4 days on a mountain road. Orenol sat down in the arena sand and did not get up. The arena was silent for 3 full seconds, then it wasn't. Kale stood still in the center of the sand, not breathing hard, not performing for the crowd, just standing, the way a man stands when he has arrived somewhere. He was always going. Up in the high box, looked. Kasvan Drath looked down at his champion sitting in the dirt, and at the unschooled Brawler from the outer districts standing over him, and at 12,000 witnesses, understood that the report his hunters had filed was not an exaggeration. He came down the steps himself. He walked across the arena sand. Kasvan Drath, Warlord of the Western Reaches, holder of every title his family had accumulated over 3 generations, and he stopped in front of Kale Joran. He knelt, not quickly, not with the panic of a man who has no choice. With the deliberate care of someone who has done the accounting and arrived at the only answer. I underestimated you, he said. Kale looked at him for a long moment. You did, he said. And then he walked back across the sand and out of the arena, because he had a long road still ahead of him, and he didn't need anything the Warlord had. System Pilgrim's Codex, all 7 strands integrated, absolute form permanent, KNELT record revised, classification final, unranked above school the Pilgrim. There are no further styles to absorb on this continent. The Codex is complete. Behind him, on the sand where he had stood, the broken sword halves that a champion had snapped across his knee in a tournament mud pit that Kale had carried every mile of the pilgrimage, every duel, every master, every hunter who came and lost, were sitting upright in the arena dirt. He had placed them there before the fight began. He didn't look back.